After many years of being faithful to his queen, Leszynska, who gave him many children, the King of France, Louis XV, fell under the spell of Louise Mailly De Nesle. But when Louis fell in love with Louise, he was unaware that the young lady had 4 younger sisters, each more seductive than the last: Pauline, Diane, Hortense and Marie-Anne. Without much ado, the demoiselles de Mailly-Nesle agreed, one after the other, to make their king happy before he moved on to the infamous Madame de Pompadour and Madame du Berry. 5 Mailly-Nesle girls, but who were they? Let's find out. Louise de Mailly-Nesle. The eldest of Louis III de Nesle's 5 daughters, Louise Julie, was born on March 16, 1710. The same year as Louis XV. She was only 16 years old when she married Louis Alexandre, the Count of Mailly, in 1726. Thanks to her high birth, Louise entered the service of Queen Maria Leszynska as lady-in-waiting at the age of 19. Louise was freed from her husband, who did not like the court and stayed on his lands. The king noticed her as early as 1732, but at this point in time he was still very much in love with his wife and faithful to her. However, eventually the queen's repeated pregnancies began to tire Louis. So with the help of the Cardinal de Fleury, Louise began a relationship with the king to cure his boredom. Their affair remained secret until 1737, and the 2 lovers used the secret doors and corridors of Versailles to see each other. In 1738, Maria Leszynska closed the door of her room for the king for good after she felt she had been pregnant one too many times, after which the relationship between the king and Louise became public knowledge. Louise, who truly loved the king, did not hope to enrich herself through the relationship. The king gave her almost nothing because she asked for nothing. Even the pension he paid her was meager, and Louise sometimes wore dresses with holes in them. Louise, in her great kindness and naivety, soon brought her sister Pauline to Versailles, who had just finished her education. Pauline was lively, naughty and charming, in contrast to her older sister, who was more reserved, shy and not very beautiful, and the king quickly replaced Louise with the more vibrant Pauline. But in 1741, Pauline died suddenly. Louise returned to her former position of maitresse of the king, and once again Louise brought one of her sisters, the youngest, Marie-Anne, to court. Upon Marie-Anne's arrival, Louis XV put a permanent end to his relationship with Louise, and she left Versailles in 1742. Louise Julie de Mailly died on November 30, 1751, at the age of 41. Pauline Félicité de Mailly-Nesle. The second daughter of Louis III de Nesle, Pauline Félicité, was born in 1712 and spent her youth in the convent of Port-Royal. Pauline, who had a lively character, quickly wanted to join her elder sister at court when she learned of Louise's status as maîtresse of the king. After writing to Louise at length about her desire to join her at Versailles, Pauline was called to court and met Louis XV in 1739. Pauline had the gift of making the king laugh, and consequently Louis fell madly in love with the young woman, but refused to make her his mistress until she was married. So in September 1739, Pauline married Félix, the Count of Ventimille, whom the king paid a considerable sum of money to remove himself far from his new wife. In fact, their marriage was never even consummated. Much to the queen's regret, it soon became apparent that the Countess of Ventimille was pregnant by the monarch. As Pauline reached the end of her pregnancy, she suddenly fell victim to high fevers, and doctors feared for her health as well as for the life of the child she was carrying. On September 3, 1741, Pauline gave birth to a son named Charles Emmanuel, who was given the title Count of Ventimille. At court, the child was given the nickname Demi-Louis, which means half Louis, because of his great resemblance to his father, the king. While little Charles-Emmanuel thrived, his mother became increasingly weak. Pauline de Mailly-Nesle died on September 9, 1741 in excruciating pain. The king mourned her death deeply and even went as far as having her death mask made so he could keep her resemblance close. Although there were rumors Pauline had been poisoned, there is no evidence for this. Historians still agree that Pauline died as a result of childbirth. Her son, Charles-Emmanuel, died in 1814. Diane Adélaïde de Mailly-Nesle. Diane Adélaïde was born on January 13, 1714, as the third sister of the Nesle family. After the death of her sister Pauline in September 1741, the king requested her to come to court, most likely with the intention of making her his new mistress. When Diane arrived at Versailles at the end of 1741, Louis had resumed his relationship with Diane's older sister, Louise. On January 19, 1742, Diane married Louis de Brancas, Duc de Lauragais. Diane's career as mistress at court was very short-lived. Within a few months of her arrival at Versailles, she had to leave court in a hurry, as rumors arose that the king had bedded the two sisters at the same time. To avoid the scandal, Diane left Versailles. In November 1744, Diane gave birth to a daughter who died 4 years later. The Duchess de Lauragais reappeared at court during the heyday of the Marquise de Pompadour. From 1745 to 1746, she was lady-in-waiting to the young wife of the Dauphin of France, Maria Theresa Raffaella of Spain. Unfortunately, the young Maria Theresa died on July 22, 1746, after which Diane went on to become lady-in-waiting to the Dauphin's second wife, Maria Josepha of Saxony, from 1747 to 1767. Diane died in Paris on November 30, 1769. Hortense Félicité de Mailly-Nesle. Hortense Félicité, the fourth sister, was born in Paris on February 11, 1715. She married François de Fouilleuse, Marquis de Flavacourt, on 21 January 1739. Hortense avoided becoming the king's mistress, although he tried bringing her to Versailles after the departure of her sister Diane. When courtiers tried to persuade her by pointing out the many advantages she could gain from such royal favor, Hortense replied that she preferred to be respected by courtiers and friends rather than being the mistress of the king. Furthermore, Hortense's husband threatened her with death if she cheated on him. Eventually, Hortense was the only one of the 5 sisters who did not start an affair with the king. Her grace and dignity earned her the admiration of the court, and eventually she became lady-in-waiting and a personal friend to the queen from 1742 to 1767. With her husband, Hortense had 2 children, Adélaïde, who died in childbirth at the age of 17, and Auguste Frédéric, who died at the age of 22 in battle. Hortense lost her husband in 1763, and she was arrested during the French Revolution and had to appear before the revolutionary court. Her good reputation saved her from the guillotine. Instead, she was locked up for a few months in a convent transformed into a prison, and she was freed in 1794. Hortense Félicité de Mailly-Nesle died in Paris a few years later on December 28, 1799. Marianne de Mailly-Nesle. The last of the 5 Nesle sisters, Marianne, was born in 1717. She was deeply affected by the death of her mother in 1729 and was left in the care of an aunt. In 1734, Marianne married Jean-Baptiste Louis, Marquis de la Tournelle, when she was just 17 years old. In 1740, her husband died, leaving her a large fortune, and Marianne wrote her sister Louise if she could come to court. In 1742, Louise secured a position in the Queen's service for Marianne. The young and beautiful woman was quickly noticed by Louis XV, but Marianne claimed she did not want to become the king's mistress. However, when the king courted her in November 1742, Marianne folded on the condition that the king would dismiss her sister Louise and make Marianne a duchess. Louis XV agreed. Louise was dismissed in December and Marianne received the title of Duchess of Châteauroux. The king, who was deeply in love with Marianne, gave in to her every whim, and because of this, Marianne quickly became unpopular at court. In August 1744, the king fell ill. Physicians feared for his life, and the clergy ordered the king to dismiss his mistress from court in order for him to be able to receive the last rites and thus enter heaven. Louis had no choice but to comply and sent Marianne away. The king recovered, however, and eventually he recalled Marianne to court. Their reunion was, however, short-lived, as Marianne died suddenly 2 weeks later. With the death of Marianne, the reign of the Nesle family over King Louis XV came to an end. Louise, Pauline and Marie-Anne inspired the painter Charles van Loo and are represented in his painting The Three Graces. Thank you for watching.